Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third class in this series of honesty and integrity. I have named this course for the year, the content of their character. And what I would like to do is each month present a different theme of interpersonal relationships that we all have with one another and explore in a very deep and significant way what Judaism has to say about these interpersonal relationships that we all have with each other. This month's theme has been honesty and integrity, and we've been looking at that simple verse in the Torah, midaver sheker tirchak. One must distance themselves from falsehood. And those simple three words have given us incredible pause for thought as we have delved quite deeply into what is true and what is false. And when can a person speak the truth? When must they speak the truth? When can a person speak falsehood? When must they? And last week, we saw that there are the simplistic understandings of what's true and what's false. Like we learn as children, you must never tell a lie and stay away from that. You must always tell the truth. But we started exploring that context defines our lives. And in the right or wrong context, one must not tell the truth. It would be awful to tell the truth. And equally, in the right or wrong context, what you might think is falsehood could actually be building up. And we saw this theme, the will of God. This was such an important component in our discussion. In Hebrew, the Ratzon Hashem, the will of God. What is that Ratzon Hashem? How do we know what God's will is? How do we know what God wants of us? What's the broader context? And we live our lives always struggling with that question and always grappling with trying to understand. And in this week's course, I want to delve a little deeper because before, like it was being said earlier, when can we get into the juicy things of when it is a mitzvah to tell a lie? Before we get into that subject, I want to first focus on the depth of what falsehood is and how many different categories there are. And for this, I want to turn to an incredible work by an incredible man. His name was Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah of Gerondi or Gerona. He was a Spanish rabbi in the 1400s, and he was one of the leading sages of his era. Very important, very influential. And he lived just after a great crisis and controversy of which he was a part. Many years earlier, in the previous century, a rabbi had written works and ideas that touched on philosophy and metaphysics. And people were not very happy that he would look into these areas of thought. And that rabbi's name was Maimonides. And people decided to ban his books. People even went so far as to burn his books. One of the great detractors of Maimonides was Rabbeinu Yonah. And he said we should not read these books. He said we should not study these books. There is alien philosophy in these books. They are banned. And very quickly, there is only a small hop, skip, and a jump from the banning of books to the burning of books. And Maimonides' book was burnt publicly, authorized by the leading rabbis of the time. In the late 1300s, in a terrible moment of Christian persecution, 24 wagon loads of the Talmud were brought to Paris and burnt publicly in an act of Christian anti-Semitism by the church against the Jewish community of France. Now, before I talk about 24 wagon loads of Talmudic copies, I want to remind you that the printing press is only invented in the 1500s. if you're going to have a manuscript of the Talmud, you know it's going to be a handwritten manuscript of the Talmud. And it was painstakingly long to write out an entire manuscript of the Talmud. There were some communities that didn't even have a whole volume. They didn't have a full set because it was just rare to have a full set. Now imagine 24 wagon loads worth of the Talmud collected and burnt publicly. The Jewish community was devastated by this act. And one person was more devastated than most. And he was Rabbeinu Yonah, the rabbi with which I introduced tonight's lecture with. And Rabbeinu Yonah felt terrible. He felt incredibly guilty. He felt that he was personally responsible for this, and he felt that it was a sign divinely given from heaven that he was wrong to criticize Maimonides and to ban his books. And because of his actions and his ban against Maimonides, he saw it as a divine punishment that now the Talmud was being burnt. But how do you make amends? How do you say sorry to a person that died 100 years earlier and for actions that have already passed? So Rabbeinu Yonah decided the following. He was going to start writing a treatise and publish it broadly, that he was mistaken and that Maimonides should be reinstated. Could you imagine? Maimonides is now kosher. And he dedicated the end of his life to writing a book on repentance. And he writes in the introduction to this book on repentance that he's writing this as his personal apology to the Rambam, to Maimonides, for coming out against him and for banning his books. This is a historical aside to who this Rabbeinu Yonah is. And it is to his book that we turn this evening, his book titled Sha'arei Teshuvah, The Gates of Repentance. This is a classic in medieval Jewish philosophy, The Gates of Repentance, Sha'arei Teshuvah. And in this small little book, he has a section titled Falsehood. And Rabbeinu Yonah spells out, get ready for this, 9 different levels of falsehood, nuanced differently one to the other. And he spells out 9 different levels of falsehood. And I would like to, in the first half of our class this afternoon, go over these 9 different levels of falsehood with you. And then at the second half of the class, which will be much shorter, maybe 10, 20% of my presentation, second half, I'd like to look at just some additional breadth on this concept of distancing ourselves from falsehood. Okay? So we turn now to the words of Rabbeinu Yonah. Now, the words of Rabbeinu Yonah were written in the 1300s in Spain. They have been popularized in a contemporary book. And it is that contemporary book that we are now going to turn to, and I share with you class number 3. As we look at different categories of falsehood that are prohibited. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Rabbeinu Yonah, in his book Sha'arei Teshuvah, lists 9 different categories. Now, before we even start, I don't know if it's an urban legend but everyone says it. They like Eskimos have 50 words for snow. Have you heard of this expression before? Yeah. Because when something is so essential to your life, when something is such a central part of your life, the nuances contained within it. By the way, you don't have to be an Eskimo. Montrealers are familiar with 25 different types of snow. I remember from living in Montreal, there was soft snow, there was slushy snow, there was freezing rain, there was all of these different types of snow. So Judaism, what does Judaism find exquisitely important? Listen to me carefully. The truth. Emet. And once you enter a civilization that takes exquisitely important a particular value, you will note that it will have nuance upon nuance in fine levels of differentiation between each of the different gradients of those themes. Because when you live with something and it is so incredibly important to you, you start to see the nuance within. And so let us begin. This summary of Rabbeinu Yonah's 9 different categories has been summarized for us in a book called Journey to Virtue, a contemporary book by Rabbi Avraham Ehrman. Okay? And these boxes are quotes from his book. Let's take a look. Number 1, this is very simple. This is very straightforward. This is what we think of when we think of falsehood, when we think of lying. What's the ultimate obvious lie? A falsehood that causes a loss to another. So let's take a look. The first and most serious category encompasses any falsehood that causes injustice or loss to another person, such as disclaiming a debt of money or property, including wages owed to a worker. So for example, if Reuven hired Shimon to do some work and didn't pay him his wages, and Shimon says, "Did you mail my check yet?" And Reuven says, "Yeah, of course I mailed your check. I mailed it 2 months ago. You misplaced it. You must have misplaced it. Check. Go back to the accounts receivable department. It's there." So what has that person done? The person has blatantly lied. And as a result of their falsehood, as a result of their lie, they've caused a loss to another person. Very straightforward. Very, very simple example. And by the way, included in that example is the reverse. If a person who's the employee lies to his boss, calls up sick, "Hi boss, I'm sorry, I'm not well. I've got to stay home today." Little do you know that he's actually in Las Vegas, and the long weekend in Montreal has turned into a Tuesday and Wednesday as well for this gentleman. So it works in the reverse way as well. He's lying. He can use up his sick days. He doesn't want to use up his sick days. And there you go. Simple, straightforward. Classic lie causes the loss to another person. Number 2, these are going to go in levels of seriousness in a gradation down. Number 2, a falsehood that indirectly causes a loss to another. A falsehood that indirectly, so this person's still lying. This is still a lie. But what is the difference here? Now it's indirect. Okay? It's indirect. The second category encompasses falsehood that does not in itself cause direct harm or loss, but is intended to lead to it. You intend for there to be a loss. Listen to this example. It's very powerful. A and B are executives in a large company. A is B's boss. B, coveting A's job, makes a point of treating A with a great show of respect and loyalty. Wow, the boss is thinking this is fantastic. Look how much respect he's showing me. Look at the praise he's always offering me. A decides to entrust B with more responsibility. B then uses his position to cause several deals to fall through in a way that reflects badly on A, but leaves B looking blameless. As a result, A is fired and B is given his job. Incredible. Incredible. Even though B's earlier respectful behavior toward A did not harm A directly, his behavior right from the start was prohibited under this category of falsehood. What are you doing in this second category? You are indirectly causing the loss to another. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you've realized this, but pause for a moment there, because I want to peel off a layer of understanding. Is that person ever going to be found out for their behavior? Could that person ever be caught for what it was that they did? Is this person ever exposed to being seen for the lies with which he has now behaved? Absolutely not. Do you know why? Because it was all inside of his head. This entire ruse to get A's confidence, to get the boss's love, respect, to show him how loyal you were, it was all part of a ruse to get his job. True, you didn't directly cause a loss to him, but in those moments when you were flattering the boss, you were participating and engaged in a moment of falsehood. And this is exquisitely delicate because this is something that no one will ever know and no one will ever be able to verify and no one will ever be able to hold you accountable to. Of course, that is, there's one person and that's God. But this is a fabulous understanding that falsehood is something that is perhaps invisible to the outside world. A falsehood that indirectly causes a loss to another. That's level 2. Let's take a look at level 3. Falsehood that causes a loss of expected profit or gain. This is amazing. Listen to the following. Level 3. The third category encompasses situations in which one person deceitfully prevents another from realizing a certain profit or advantage and diverts it to himself, or deceives someone into giving him a present. This may not cause any actual loss, but it still deprives someone from the expected benefit or profit. Let me give an example. Cheating on an entrance exam to a college. Do you remember last year, there was a whole scandal in the news where certain celebrities, I think they were film stars, there were certain celebrities who had paid money. I think it was even Harvard University that was implicated in this. Certainly some Ivy League universities. They had paid money or made a donation to the university, or actually in some cases simply bribed and paid off the exam entrance testing center, asking for the questions in advance or asking for them to give a better grade. Do you remember that? Now, what happens when you're cheating in such a fashion? You're causing another person to lose out on the place that they would have fulfilled at the university. So as a result of your falsehood, as a result of your behavior, as a result of the lies, I sign the declaration that I am going to take this test and I've not been given any indication previously that I've been exposed to the questions. When you lie, when that falsehood takes place, you're causing the loss of somebody else, of what they could have gained or the profit that they could have had. I want to share with you a story. This is an amazing story. I want to share with you a story that indicates the thoughtfulness that one must employ to make sure you don't cause a loss to somebody else. Are you ready for an inspirational story? This is going to rock you.
Yeah, sure.
There was a rabbi in Chicago by the name of Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik. You probably heard of his famous cousin, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. So this is the cousin, Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik. He was in Chicago and he was once traveling with his grandson to New York. And when he went to the travel agent to buy his ticket, she told him, oh, there's a special on right now. The airline can give you a companion ticket at a discounted price for a family member. And the agent, sometimes airlines, depending on your status with points, depending on if there's a promotion available. So the airline said, if you want a second ticket, we can give you a discounted price for a fellow family member. And the agent said, he said, oh, that's great. I'm going with my grandson. And the agent said, wonderful, fine. Your grandson's covered. Now stop there. Don't look on in the story. I want you to imagine for a moment You're booking an airline ticket. You're working through a travel agent. And they turn around in the middle of the call and they say, oh, there's a special promotion right now. Discounted price for a second ticket for family members. And you say, how about a grandson? And they say, yeah, sure. That's a family member. What would 99% of people do? That's great. Thank you very much. Right? That's what we would all do. Do I say we? I'll speak personally. You are all righteous, holy individuals. But I think I would be like, hang on a second, I'm going to get 20 of my grandchildren on this ticket, even though I don't have grandchildren right now. So I think that's what most people would do. What did Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik do? At this point in the story, he says something's a bit off there, because usually when it's a family member, what is it typically? It's a spouse, it's a nuclear family, it's children, It's not a grandchild. Usually a family member doesn't extend to a grandchild. So he says, I want you to please send me the terms and conditions and all of the small print that the legal team at the company has put out, because there's always the terms and conditions. I want to read it for myself. And he reads it for himself. And lo and behold, the agent had made a mistake. And it didn't cover grandchildren. It incorporated spouses and children, but not grandchildren. And he said, I insist on paying for the full fare ticket for my grandson, who's going to accompany me as a second passenger on this flight. Isn't that incredible? Why? Because this was another, not variation, what's the better word? This was another expression, that's a better word. This is another expression of be extremely distant from falsehood. Stay far away from falsehood. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, the third level out of a 9-level system is that a person should not even participate in a falsehood that will cause a loss of expected profit or gain. Fascinating. Could you imagine living your life that way? Maybe you do already. Maybe you do already. Perhaps there's somebody here that has had an opportunity, a bonus, a promotion presented in front of you. And you say to yourself, hang on a second, that sounds too good to be true. And you explore and it is too good to be true. And you say, no, I can't take advantage of your mistake. On a simple level, when you're at IGA and the cashier gives you too much change back, right? That would be an example of number 3. A falsehood that causes a loss of expected profit or gain. There's an expected profit that IGA has every time that they serve you for the right amount of food or produce. And suddenly the cashier makes an innocent mistake. Excuse me, you gave me $20 too much. Now imagine it's your bank that makes a mistake and it's $20 million too much. Okay, that got a few more smiles from the audience. Okay, who's running to give that money back? By the way, yesterday, if I can go off on a tangent, I was caught between picking up one of my kids and doing some errands and having to run into the supermarket. You know, you do 3 things at the same time and you're rushing. As I ran into the supermarket, I didn't think anything happened until I got a tap on the shoulder. And this person, complete stranger, this woman, taps me on the shoulder. She says, you're running too quickly. I've been trying to chase after you. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm in a rut. Like, who are you? And then she pulls out, she says, 50 meters ago, you dropped your wallet on the floor. It fell out of your pocket. Here's your wallet. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, I'm trying to do too many things at once. Thank you so much. It's an incredible act of righteousness. Don't worry, there was no money. There was no money in it. 4, number 4. deliberately misrepresenting facts that do not harm others. Okay, here, no harm is done. No harm is done. But the fourth category encompasses deliberately misrepresenting what one has heard, even though no personal benefit is gained from doing so and no one else is harmed. What we might call a white lie. A white lie. No one is harmed. No one benefits. You're just deliberately misleading. Now, there's more to speak about here, because next week it's this one that is going to be where so much is said when it comes to doing a mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah to lie. Okay, remember this. We're going to come back to it next week. Deliberately misrepresenting the facts that do not harm others. Rabbeinu Yonah says this is the fourth category of nuance on a 9-level ladder of distancing ourselves from falsehood. Even if it's a white lie, it's not the full story, okay? Remember this? There's more to be said. There's more to be said. Number 5, offering a favor or gift without intending to follow through. This 5th category encompasses offering to do a favor or gift without intending to do so. Do you know what happens the whole time when there's a bereavement or something very sad happens to somebody else? There's this empty expression. Let me know if you need anything, right? Or call me if you need help. Doesn't have to be a bereavement. That's an extreme example. There's this empty gesture of, I'm here if you need anything. And you're like, I hope that person never calls me. But it's what you say. I'm here if you need anything. So that's just offering a favor without intending to follow through. There is a brilliant example. Did anyone read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Option B? Did anyone read that? Sheryl Sandberg she retired last year. She was the COO of Facebook. You know Sheryl Sandberg, right? You must know Sheryl Sandberg, yeah. And you've probably heard of her book, Option B. I'm sure if you didn't read it, it's a must. It's a brilliant book. Her husband tragically died in the prime of his life, leaving her with 2 little kids. It's an awful, awful tragedy. She's very Jewish in the book. She explains what Shiva is. She explains what Shloshim is, 7 days after bereavement, 30 days after bereavement. And she talks about living life after bereavement. She has a passage in that book that is genius. There's many passages that are gold. There's one passage that is absolute gold. She says this. She says, in all of the experiences that she had after her husband passed, the most empty was this generic, if you need anything, call me. Or, I'm here. What do you need? And she said, it's just so generalized. She said the best moment she ever had came when somebody called her up and said, what do you not like on your burger? She's like, what? She's like, what do you not like on your burger? She's like, some people don't like onions. Some people don't like mushroom. Some people don't like lettuce. What do you not? I'm buying you a burger for dinner. What do you not like on your burger? And she said it was one of the most validating, most humanizing of conversations she's ever had. You don't offer help to someone. What do you need? I don't need anything. My husband just died. I need my husband back. That's what I need. Like, I'm a grieving widow. What do I need? I don't need anything. And suddenly someone's telling her proactively, I'm picking you up burgers for dinner. I'll be there in an hour. What am I not putting inside the burger? And she said it was such an incredible moment. And I have to tell you, I've shared that line 50 times, if not 100. And then there's something else. There's actually living that line. When you know someone's going through a tough time, call them up. What do you not want on your pizza? I promise you, especially because we all feel helpless. When there's a bereavement, we all feel helpless. I want to do something for them, but you know you can't do anything for them. You can't bring back the person that passed away. But you know what you can do? What do you not like on your pizza? I'm picking up pizza. It's going to be there in an hour. What do you not like on your pizza? It's a game changer. It flips the entire relationship. It's an amazing thing. But offering a favor without intending to follow through, that's the 5th level of falsehood. Number 6, backing out of a promise to do something for someone. Has that ever happened to you? Have you been on the receiving end of somebody saying, you know, I said I was going to come over and help you put up that bookcase. Yeah, I'm really busy now. This 6th category, promising to do something with the intention of keeping your word. You had the full intention to do it. It's just that you decide afterwards to renege on your promise. Now, there's 3 ways a person's word can be a promise according to Judaism. If you use the word I promise, if the word given, when you say what you're going to do is such a small favor, the recipient would have no reason to believe that you wouldn't keep it. Or if you made that statement in public, if you make that statement in public, your word has to be kept. All of these 3 are 3 examples of what it means to make a promise. So if you say, I promise to take you to see the movie, or, yeah, I'll take you home and it's just around the corner, or at a public meeting, I'll work on that synagogue committee. How many times have you said those words only to be like, oh gosh, I'll work on that synagogue committee? That is the 6th level of making a promise to do something for somebody, intending to do it, but then reneging. It's an act of falsehood. It's an act of falsehood. By the way, somebody that pledges to donate tzedakah has made a pledge of a public promise. That's interesting. When you make a pledge to make a gift of tzedakah, that has the status of a public promise. Very interesting. Number seven, pretending to do someone a favor, especially if they now feel a debt of gratitude to you. So what might that look like? You pretend to do something, or you were doing something for yourself. Let's say you cleaned up the house because you can't stand living in a mess anymore. And then your spouse comes home and she says, oh my God, amazing. Or he says, you cleaned up the house for me. And you're like, yes, honey, I cleaned up the house for you. So you weren't intending to do it for them. You're pretending to do it for them. You go to the airport to meet someone you're picking up, and someone else that you know arrives. Oh, you came to the airport to see me. That's so nice. Of course I came, just for you. I knew you were coming. That would be the 7th level, pretending to do someone a favor. And by the way, we slip into that in our own lives. How easy is that? It's all in our head. It's all in our head because the act that we've done has been done. And yet when a person misunderstands what we have done, we then take the credit for it. How easy is it to take the credit for something? And they would never know. Here again, we see the subtle nuance of an internal mechanism of your own intentions, your own mind, your own beliefs, and how you can twist that, how you can shape that to get another person mistakenly believing that the actions that you did were for them. this is very sinister. It sounds very innocent, but it's actually very sinister, because what are you doing in this number 7? You're actually controlling another person's mind. Think about that for a second. Can someone give me a good example? I can't think of a good example. Can someone suggest, take yourselves off of mute if you can. Can someone suggest a good example of what it might be that you're pretending to do somebody a favor, even though you actually didn't do the act on their behalf? You just did it for yourself, or you did it for somebody else, but you can claim credit for it because of their misunderstanding. Can anyone think up a good example? The example here that I have on the sheet is that you come in and you're going to put something on sale in the store, and the person is like, oh, you know what? For you, I'll give it to you at a sale. I'll give it to you at a discount. You were going to do that anyway. The item was on sale anyway. It's this subtle nuance of misleading somebody. Number 8, praising oneself or accepting praise for qualities that one does not have. Accepting praise for a quality you do not have. You are so humble. Oh, thank you very much. There's nobody as humble as me. Wow, you are so well spoken. You are so thoughtful. And then you accept that praise. You accept that praise. It's another level of falsehood. Fascinating. And number 9, the last one in this 9-level stage of falsehood, minor lies for one's own convenience when no one else is affected. So this last category will cover the kind of falsehoods that people will say for their own convenience or pleasure. Doesn't cause a loss to anyone, doesn't even indicate a total lack of sensitivity to the value of truth. What time did you go to bed last night? Oh, early. It was around 10. When you know it was midnight. Minor lies for the sake of convenience. These are the 9 stages of nuance that Rabbeinu Yonah presents to us. And he walks his way through these different sensitivities. And here, as a key theme, to the untrained, it's either red wine or it's white wine. But to a wine connoisseur, there are many categories to describe wine. To those lacking sensitivity, it was a small lie. It wasn't a big deal. But to a Jewish person who is a connoisseur of the truth, there are 9 categories of falsehood. Isn't that amazing? To a connoisseur, here, put that on your fridge for the week. It's a great line. To a connoisseur of truth, there are 9 categories of falsehood. That's a powerful sentence. The more categories a culture has to describe something, the more sensitive that culture is to that object or that value. And now I want to go into the second half of our class. Falsehood that doesn't even involve language. Because this is so incredibly powerful, you can give a falsehood by body language. You can give a falsehood by silence, right? You're in a circle of people talking, and someone has the crowd's attention, and they're making a statement, and what do? Your eyes bulge. Oh, you should have seen my dinner party last night. We had 100 people there. And you're like, everyone in that circle can see the eye language, can see the body language. It is so powerful. And you know what? And you all know this to be true. But researchers now say that body language is much more communicative than speech. Our speech is limited, right? You always say, if you want to communicate something, don't put it in an email. The worst form of speech or the worst form of communication is an email. But even language is a poor form of communication. Much more powerful than language is our body language. So when you roll your eyes or you cough or your eyes bulge or you give that wry smile as if to say, yeah, right, seriously? Come on, we all know that this isn't accurate. That too is an aspect of falsehood. There's an amazing statement in the Talmud that says that staying quiet could be falsehood. This is an amazing statement. Minayin letalmid sheyoshev lifnei rabbo. From where do we know, asks the Talmud, if a student is sitting in front of his rabbi, and his rabbi, his teacher, is the judge in a court case? And that student sees perhaps a supporting argument for the poor litigant or an argument against the rich litigant that his teacher missed. From where do we know that that student must not stay silent? Minayin shelo yishtok. From where do we know? I'll come to you in a second. From where do we know the student must not stay silent? Talmud Lomar, the Talmud comes to teach us, midaveh sheker tirchak. Amazing. The three words with which we started our course. So if you are a budding student in a court case and you see your teacher who has missed something and you have been able to see or perhaps foresee something that the teacher or the master has missed, staying silent would be an act of falsehood. Isn't that interesting? Midava Sheker Tirchak teaches us, speak up. You can't
Rabbi,
stay quiet.
Isn't
Yeah,
there the
Alice.
notion? Isn't there the notion too, though, of first of all, there are other no other ideas of not embarrassing your teacher, but also
Well, you
not
don't have to do it
embarrassing.
in a way that would completely make them a fool. Oh, of
No,
course
but
you're right. Of course you're right.
if you speak up, even if you do it in a respectful manner, with like in say with all due respect, what about you still would be embarrassing someone in public that they missed this, that they're supposed to be the
And
the
what do you
expert.
learn? Therefore, you're right. Even if you do it respectfully, and what do you learn, therefore, from this passage of the Talmud? Take it to its logical conclusion, Alice, and therefore?
Yeah. Therefore, you do it privately.
Therefore, you do it anyway.
You do it anyway.
And therefore, you do it anyway.
Mhm.
Yes, he might feel a little sheepish. Yes, he might feel a little bit embarrassed. Yes, it might be an awkward moment. Of course, you should do it respectfully, perhaps privately. But what you mustn't do is stay silent.
Yeah,
What you must do is speak.
but perhaps privately,
Yes.
or approach the bench
Yes.
after.
Good. Absolutely. We always want to minimize the embarrassment. The human dignity component is of sacrosanct value. Yet, nevertheless, if you are sitting in front of your teacher and you've seen something that they missed, you must. Midaveh sheker tirchak. Amazing. So we have come full circle with these three words. They're so small. Midaveh sheker tirchak. Distance yourself from falsehood. These three Hebrew words has now taught us that staying silent could be the transgression of this command. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And of course, just to completely round off this subject, what about listening to falsehood? What about listening to falsehood? This last aspect to the mitzvah is to not listen to something that is false. By the way, would we be allowed to watch the news anymore? Have I just ruined the radio? I mean, this is scary. Mitzad harichuk hizhiratenu shelo noteh aznanenu klal shum davar shenachshav shehu sheker. An aspect of distancing. What is an aspect of distancing? Is not to incline your ear at all to hear anything one believes to be false. But even if the listeners do not know for certain that this particular matter is a lie, if you suspect that something is false, don't even listen anymore. And here's the corollary to having a student sit with you when you're in a court case. How do you know that as a judge, you shouldn't have an inappropriate student sitting in front of you? Let's say you have an unlearned apprentice. You're not allowed to have an unlearned apprentice to sit in front of you. Why? Because if that unlearned apprentice is discussing the case on trial, the unlearned apprentice might cause the teacher to make an error. So from where do we know we're not even allowed to have an unlearned student in such a location? The same verse once more. Amazing. See how careful you have to be when going into a court case with one of your students? If the student has seen something the teacher hasn't, the student has to speak up. And if the teacher realizes that the student isn't appropriate or has reached the right level, don't bring him in with you. He might cause you to make a mistake. Now we'll finish with one last idea. What about just normal exaggeration? Just normal exaggeration. Wow, that building is as tall as a skyscraper. It scrapes the sky. The entire city came to the wedding last night. It was amazing. That's how people talk. That's how people talk. That's fine. We know when a person is making a wild exaggeration. It's a part of human language. It's a part of how we communicate with one another. That, believe it or not, is not considered falsehood. Fascinating. So there is room for this wild exaggeration because everybody realizes the context for it to be nothing other than wild exaggeration. Okay? Good. Let's have a quick review. As we review the themes of this class, falsehood is not only determined by what you say, but also by the accuracy of the message that others understand from your words and actions, even when you don't say anything misleading. Therefore, in assessing how truthful we are, we need to consider the truthfulness of our non-verbal communication, facial expressions, body language, even silence. The rejection of falsehood must be so complete, we don't even listen to words of falsehood. And finally, since falsehood is determined by the message that others understand from your words, if everyone understands that you're exaggerating, it's not falsehood, your words are just not accurate. That we wouldn't call falsehood. Okay. I'd like to open it up for questions, comments, thoughts, ideas. Anybody? Anything strike you? Yes, Tom.
Hi. I'm struck by the fact that today's world, it's very hard to differentiate truth from the falsehood. It's getting more and more difficult. Can you give us any guidance to bring to bear on this?
I think I'm as lost as you are. We live in a post-truth world. that the Oxford English Dictionary, this was like 5 years ago, that the Oxford English Dictionary could put as its word of the year, post-truth. Do you remember when, what was the, I forget her name, the speaker from, she was the press secretary to the White House at the beginning of Trump's term of office. I forget her name. Don't remind me, it doesn't matter. I don't need to. She used that word, like alternative facts, right? It was this George Orwellian nightmare that we suddenly found ourselves living in. And we live in a post-truth world. So what is the truth? The truth is, and here is the greatest truth of all, you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. And when you know who you are and what you stand for and the values that are important to you, that becomes the yardstick with which you measure your entire life. And for one person, it will be one context, and another person, it will be another. But when we know who we are and we know our values and we know what's important, then that is how we need to behave by ourselves and when we're in the presence of others as well. And when it comes to the news and politics and all the rest of it, you throw your hands up because you say, okay, there's differences of opinion. There's differences of opinion. But you don't have to have your opinion as fact. Gina and then Vivian. Yes, please.
So, well, first, thank you. I thought it was great today, but it's creating a little bit of confusion if I compare this session to last, where my understanding, and maybe wrongly so, is that truth is a little bit, in the last session I got that it was a little bit more relative to the situation, that speaking truth at all costs is not always in one's best interest.
Correct.
Right? Whereas today I'm hearing that, you know, even if it might embarrass the rabbi, you absolutely must speak the truth. And then there's just this other example of, let's say I'm at the airport and I'm just hanging out at the airport and somebody arrives that I know and they say, fantastic, you're here to pick me up. And you realize no harm in taking this person home. But the truth is that you weren't there to pick up that person. So what would be the correct, right? So in the context of falsehood, where I understood falsehood does not necessarily mean telling a lie, or doing the right thing doesn't necessarily mean always telling the truth. It would be a wonderful thing if I were to say, yeah, I'll take you home. So is that a falsehood that would be judged as being negative?
That is a precious question. And I thank you for the very articulate way that you formulated it. It was excellent. I think the distinction between what we looked at last week, where we realize that sometimes falsehood is appropriate and truthhood is inappropriate, is in the realm of those interpersonal relationships where we will tread on people and cause harm and hurt in the way in which we are sticklers for the truth. And, well, I'm just telling the truth. I've got to say it as it is. Like, so nasty of you. I mean, you know, what were we brought up with? If you don't have anything nice to say nothing at all. So there are times where the truth doesn't have to be said. And that entering into falsehood is in the broader context of, as God's will, what is the greater good?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what we looked at last week. And next week, we will focus specifically on that topic. When is it a mitzvah to lie? But here, in those variations, and coming to your example, you're at the airport, someone's like, oh my gosh, you came to pick me up. It would be incorrect to say yes, because that was not your intention. And there is something very manipulative. It's a very strong word, because you're now controlling the other person's mind. Because in that person's mind, you came to the airport to pick them up. You are asserting yourself over them in a way. You're controlling their mind. And the right response would be, it is my pleasure to take you home. I'm so happy I bumped into you. I love you. I adore you. Get in, of course. You should know this was pure chance. This was so fortuitous. I'm so happy it worked out this way. Now I know why I came to the airport. But I just want you to know, like, I didn't actually come to the airport intentionally to see you and pick you up. Now you're here, of course, jump in. That is the difference. That is the difference. And there should be a commitment to truth.
But then how would it not be a manipulation of somebody's mind, even in an interpersonal relationship? Whereas in that context, you said a little bit more licensure to not, you know what I'm saying? So anyways, I know this could go on and on.
No,
but what would be
good.
the difference, like between the airport and me talking?
I don't think you've hurt a person's feelings when you fortuitously bump into them at the airport and they're like, oh my gosh, what a surprise, you came to pick me up.
Got it.
Actually, I'm surprised too. Jump in. This is so fortuitous. You haven't hurt their feelings. But when the person has a terrible haircut and they come back from the hairdressers and they're feeling nervous and they're like, listen, I don't know how to tell you. I feel like it just ruined it. And take the hat off and the big reveal, da-da. And you're like, oh, it's hideous. What did he do to you? Why'd you have to say that? Yes, it's true, but why'd you have to say that? No, it's actually nice. It's okay. It's no, you've got a beautiful hat.
You could say it'll grow back.
It'll grow back. You know, it's hat season. I really love your hats. Now's the time to wear hats. So that's that's the broader context. Excellent question. And thank you for pushing me on that. Vivian, yes. I'm sorry, you're on mute. Hang on. Start again, Vivian. You're on mute. Yes.
Yes. You are saying that for our character defines us.
Yes.
And the way, and the most important way to define our character is also to distance ourselves from falsehood and be in the truth. Yet, the truth depends on the context.
Yes.
The truth depends on the intentions.
Yes.
Even when you have a good intention, you never know how it will reflect on the other person's.
Absolutely.
And especially when you don't have a good intention, you are creating harm. So watch out for the context and for your intentions, because they are part of your character. They become you.
100%. 100%. Beautifully said. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Hopefully we've achieved enough of a prohibition of telling a falsehood that we would never come onto this lightly or easily, that now next week we're ready for a completely different perspective. When is it a mitzvah to lie? Stay tuned next week. Thank you very much, everybody. It's lovely to see you. And I look forward to continuing to see you again next Tuesday lunchtime. All the best, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.